Hey friends. Well, here I am on day 2 of knowing I have COVID. I had it was kind of an interesting night because I really whereas most of the day yesterday I felt not asymptomatic, but pretty, kind of okay. Kind of like I had a light head cold. Overnight, I definitely got kind of fevery and, had that like flushing it through my system thing happen. And I woke up this morning and felt great. Felt like I was essentially over it. And I've over the course of today, I have kind of flagged a little bit. I'd say I'm a little more tired now than usual for sure. And it's not through my system yet, but I'm definitely trending in a good direction. And I've had a chance to reflect a little bit on, well, just what, I talked about this yesterday, I think, as well, but just what self-care constitutes, right? And there's a dimension of it that I think it's hard for someone like me to really do, and I think I suspect that many of you and people I know may have this issue too, where basically it's doing nothing. The idea of doing nothing is really hard sometimes, but I've noticed over the last day, yesterday and today, that it's also really important. And it's not just, maybe this is also where, meditation, like a true 2 hours of meditation every day would suffice. But there's a kind of just a doing nothing. And by doing nothing, I really mean letting everything go, not actively striving for anything, and simply enjoying being. And I know I've talked a lot, especially kind of even in the posts leading up to the last couple of days, about the underlying substrate of bliss that we have access to, both through meditation and just in every moment. It's there. It's the foundation of everything. And that can come through in activity. It can come through in action. But for someone who's, I would say, like borderline addicted to action, it's also really helpful to have a forced period of doing nothing and to have this sense that especially now that I'm feeling a little bit better. I hope, ideally, knock on wood, I'll feel even better tomorrow, and kind of get through this thing. But especially as I feel better, the idea of staying in this house and just doing nothing is like, what? It feels so foreign because I've been running so hard for so long. And it also feels oddly really good. It feels really good to just have just stopped. It's almost like as I'm lying in bed with my COVID fever dreams playing, I can observe them and see, my mind is trying to fix. It's like last night I was going through the script in my mind and rehearsing all of the lines that have been changed. And I can promise you that this wasn't like an accurate rendition of what has changed in the script. It was my fever dream version of that. But I had the wherewithal to observe in the middle of it all, like, why am I doing that? Is this necessary? Is this helpful? Is there anything coming from this other than my mind having an excuse to continue worrying? And so, but you know, in the context of all out activity, that underlying agitation is sometimes hard to witness. It's hard to notice that it's there, because there's so much moving on the surface, and there's so much external activity happening that it almost either that underlying agitation doesn't get noticed, or it feels perfectly appropriate to the circumstances, because there's all this stuff to think about and deal with and work on and change and fix and whatever, you know, there's this constant activity. So I'm really appreciating, as much as I have a hard time saying it, because I know what I'm putting people through at the theater, I am appreciating this forced halt on my activity, strictly from the point of view of reminding me that doing nothing is incredibly important. It's also in the doing of nothing that I have a chance to recall. It's like my own sense impressions of myself become more vivid. And what I mean by that is, like, I will stand back and see how hard I've been driving, that there are these kind of two parts of myself, one of which is the full being, and the other of which is kind of like the mind, or the intellect, the executive function. And I'll see how hard my executive function has been driving the rest of me. And it feels sort of like, wow, I can't believe I would do that to me. It feels overbearing. But if it weren't for doing nothing, I don't think I would have observed that. I think it would have, again, just felt appropriate. It would have just felt like, this is where we are, this is where I am. And so again, it's not that this work has to be, it's not that you have to choose between doing this work or being kind to ourselves. But it is that the faster we're running, and the more we're kind of pursuing this, the more we're pursuing something, creative project or whatever, really intensely, the more we kind of have to remind ourselves to just also be kind to ourselves and do nothing from time to time. And it's doing nothing is almost like it's a form of meditation. It's a form of just being with what is and not trying to change anything. And so I'm just really kind of appreciating that, both yesterday and today, feeling into that, detecting what my state is, what my state has been. It's like these sense impressions are coming up from the past month or so, where I'm just seeing how hard I've been pushed by myself. And it feels good. It feels good to acknowledge that. It feels good to receive that, and to kind of remember it doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be that way. I have the option of giving myself a little grace and space anytime. Right now I'm having an imposed 5 days of grace and space, an intense 5-day retreat of grace and space. But so yeah, it's been really powerful over the last day or so to observe that, and to feel into what's going on there. Because I think, again, like I was saying yesterday, remembering how much I miss my family, remembering those personal connections. I had several. It's just like the universe is just synchronicity. I had several friends call me today, who did not know that I had COVID. They just called out of the blue, and we chatted. It was like we checked in. And if I was in rehearsal, there was no way I would have answered these calls. I wouldn't have even, I would have had my phone off. And even if I hadn't been in rehearsal, it's unlikely I would have answered the calls because I'm so slammed from one minute to the next. So it's just bizarre how connected all that is. Right as I was having this moment of recalling how significant these other aspects of my life are and these relationships are, they just showed up. They reached out unprompted. It's not like they were all calling me to say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry you have COVID." They didn't even know. They just called to say hi. So, yeah, doing nothing is where it's at. I had another good friend and collaborator mention something the other day about how when we're working at this really high vibration like we are when we're launching a show, it gets really hard to go to sleep at night. And that's been certainly one of my issues. I mean, that's why it's basically how I think I got COVID, is by pushing myself too hard and staying up too late and then not being able to sleep and having to get up the next morning early and do it all over again. I had 2, maybe 3 nights in a row where I essentially got very little sleep, almost not none, but not very much. And my system kind of sagged, and then the bug got in. But she was saying that it would be the ultimate sign of a pro would be if you could do that, if you could work at that incredibly intense level, but then still shut it down and ground and let that energy travel out of the mind, out of the head. My Qigong teacher used to call it Qi getting stuck in the head, and that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like there's a bundle of light just in the head, just kicking around in the head, and it won't go, and it just activates thoughts. And of course, if we're paying attention, we notice that those thoughts aren't really doing anything. They're not generally doing any necessary work. That might not always be the case, but it's generally the case that they're not doing necessary work. They're just kind of the mind firing off thoughts. And the sign of a true professional would be if you could do that and go in that incredibly high vibration state and have all that energy resonating in our intellect, but then just release it, let it all go, drop back down into the body and rest. Just rest. So that we get to recover, so that our physical body can recover from the strain of that, of holding all that energy and driving in that way. And that's something that I'm feeling like might be one of the lessons in this experience for me, is the ability to kind of, ideally, I won't have to catch a global pandemic bug in order to do this in the future. But it's just online for me as an observation and as a practice. I think I'm gonna formulate this into a deliberate practice for myself, where I'm good about having a morning routine, but I don't really have an evening routine of letting the day go in that way. And I think that's something that may come out of this, is really trying to give myself an evening routine where after a day of just going like a rocket all day, I pull the rocket back to earth, put it on the ground, tether it to the ground, and turn the engines off and rest. So I'll be very grateful if that comes from this, if I'm able to successfully develop that from this experience. So yeah, thank you folks some of you have sent me some very sweet notes of concern and warm wishes, so I appreciate you, love you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.